Senator Murray, Distinguished Chairman of Appropriations.
Thank you, Chair Whitehouse. Really appreciate you holding this hearing. Director Swagel, good to see you again. Thank you to you and all your staff at CBO for the critical work you do for our Congress. You know, Mr. Chairman, my dad actually ran a five and dime store. If you nodded, then you're just gave away your age. But he ran a five and dime store, and my mom worked as a bookkeeper when we were growing up. But you know, you don't have to run a cash register or be an accountant to understand the really basic fact that when it comes to our national budget, spending is just half of the equation. There is also revenue. And I mentioned this because when our Republican colleagues talk about debt and deficits, they tend to discuss only that one side of the ledger, which is spending. So I want to focus on something that goes overlooked, or rather goes unsaid, by my Republican colleagues, because while they love to talk about reining in spending, as the chairman just talked about, which in my mind actually means the investments that we make for families and working people, I don't hear the same concern regarding the huge tax breaks that go to mostly billionaires. When we need to get one thing clear: despite all the bogeymen that Republicans like to point to driving the national debt, the reality is that the single biggest driver of our national debt since 2001 has been Republican tax cuts. The Trump and Bush tax cuts have cost our nation over $10 trillion and counting. And what do Republicans want to do if they return to power? What's at the top of the Trump economic agenda? Do they want to solve the child care crisis? Do they want to extend health care credits that are saving millions of families thousands of dollars? Of course not. They want more tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy and biggest corporations. Republicans' big economic vision is to extend their horribly one-sided Trump tax cuts. If Republicans are so concerned about the national debt, why is it that every time they get the chance, they start giving away cash and writing tax loopholes for mega corporations? So we've got to get real. There's no reason that investors on Wall Street should pay less in taxes than a firefighter in Spokane, Washington, or a nurse in Seattle, or that companies making billions in profits should pay less than mom and pop shops in Washington State. And there's every reason for us to ask the wealthiest people in our country to pay their fair share so we can make this country stronger for everyone. So for parents back in Washington State, for working families, they don't want us to invest in the richest people in the world. They want us to invest in our roads and schools and healthcare and security and ending the child care crisis, things that actually make their lives better. You have to be kind of out of touch to miss that. That is, for my colleagues to know, why Vice Chair Collins and I have both worked together to reach a bipartisan agreement to increase both defense and non-defense discretionary funding as part of our FY25 appropriations process, so we can invest in our security and in our working families and our communities, not just to throw money away at billionaires. Now, Director, I have talked at length about the hardship and pain capping non-defense discretionary spending puts on Americans. Yet Republicans only insist on those caps. They also put outsized focus on the spending as it relates to the deficit. Current NDD spending as a percentage of GDP has declined from the long-term average, and NDD spending accounts for less than a single % of the increase in spending since the start of the pandemic in 2019, which are the spending levels Republicans want us to return to. Director Swagel, beyond emergency pandemic spending, what are the significant drivers behind our country's deficit over the last decade?
Yeah, it's, I would point to three things. You know, one is rising interest payments, two is rising healthcare costs, and then three is rising spending on other benefit programs. Social Security is the largest of them. And so it's the aging of the population, it's healthcare cost growth, and it's interest costs.
And revenue?
And revenue is not kept up. And you could see that in the charts put up by both the chair and the ranking member, that legislative action has made it so that, you know, rather than rising, revenue as a share of GDP has remained flat. So as spending has gone up, revenue is not kept up.
Okay, and there was one legislative change since your last projection in February that affected revenue, the IRS rescissions. According to your report, these rescissions accounted for a $32 billion reduction in projected revenue. The IRS and Treasury project six-fold returns for every dollar spent on tax informant. Yet we continue to hear from our Republican friends that we should target IRS funding as part of the increasing deficit. So last question, how does the rescinding funds provided to the IRS under the Inflation Reduction Act impact revenue and deficits?
So in our calculations, a dollar that goes to the IRS results in an additional $2 of revenue, so for a net of $1. So the rescissions on net increase the deficit.
Thank you, appreciate that.